So the purpose of this session is not to patronize you in any way. It's hopefully to validate and having opportunities like this to just stop, think and reflect on things is always a good thing. So if by the end of this session you're thinking, yeah, I knew all of this, we're going in the right direction, I'm delighted. If I do trigger some thoughts in your minds of things that you haven't necessarily considered, that's great as well. Just to give you a little bit more flesh on the bones of me, I have been operating independently for 14 years now. Prior to that, 17 years on the inside of corporate organisations, so over 30 years in this field. I'm not a career consultant. I've worked now in 64 countries with every industry you can possibly imagine. So I'm in quite an unusual situation that I've seen the evolution of experience management, and I'll clarify that in a moment, in every industry, public sector, private sector, B2B, B2C, B2B2C, on every continent on Earth, with the exception of Antarctica, as I always say. So much of what I'm going to share with you, I describe as global best practice, purely from the perspective that what I'm sharing with you is representative of everything that I've seen all around the world. In terms of what I do, I spend about 50% of my time sharing knowledge in this subject, the other 50% of my time helping organizations understand how to operationalize it. And I use that term very intentionally. All of you will know from your day-to-day roles that the theory has been done to death. And that's a bit of an issue in a way, because intuitively, all of the people that we collectively influence, they sort of get it, sort of understand it, but still in 2026, there are many people leading organizations that are unclear as to how to actually do it. And that's a key focus, has always been a key focus of what I do and continues to be a key focus. As a result, as I start to talk to you, this question of what is customer experience is still a question to this day that I think in the majority of cases, there is a lack of clarity and understanding. Intuitively, organizations do understand that we should be doing the right thing for the customer to a degree, but this point about how, it's a massive problem. And so whenever I talk about the subject, I start by just allowing people to understand the evolution of customer experience. And you'll notice that I've crossed out customer experience, and James will be pleased to see that I've replaced CX with XM, and I'll explain why. What I always try to get leaders to understand is that, as you all know, customer experience has always existed. From the day an organization was created, it was delivering an experience. But it was only in relatively recent times, 30 to 35 years ago, in the early days of direct marketing, that customer experience as we know it today started to take shape. We evolved from direct marketing into CRM until eventually, in April 2011, customer experience being recognized as a discipline in its own right for the very first time. Now, why am I always specific about April 2011? Well, that marks the formation of the world's first association in customer experience, the CXPA, the Customer Experience Professionals Association. A lot of people don't know that prior to 2011, CX as an acronym didn't exist. It just didn't exist at all. Now, I first had customer experience in my job title in 2005. Tim will know that nationwide we're probably focusing on CX around that time too, if not earlier. So it wasn't new, but it was only in April 2011 that I personally realized it wasn't just me doing this. When the professional association was created, it always had the intention of defining the standards by which the profession should operate. And so in April 2014, the world's first professional qualification in customer experience came along, the CCXP accreditation. The problem is that as I sit here right now, there are approximately 1,700 people globally with that CCXP accreditation. 1,700 people globally with the world's only professional qualification in customer experience is not even scratching the surface. In fact, I argue that we haven't even got anywhere near the surface. And it's just one indicator that whilst more and more talk about this, that doesn't necessarily mean that the capability, the competency to actually make it happen exists in organizations. But as you all know, we continue to evolve. And around 2018, there was growing rhetoric around not just the importance of customer experience, but also the importance of employee experience. The most customer-centric organizations on earth have always known that you can't deliver great customer experience without your people. But it was only around 2018 that others started to talk about it. And as a result, in 2026, as you all know, in this digitally obsessed world that we live in, I feel it is the responsibility of those of us working in this field to explain to organizations that it doesn't matter how digitally enabled you become, experiences are all about human to human interaction. Digital technology should not be seen as a way of eliminating that interaction. It should be seen as a way of better enabling that interaction. So as we are now in 2026, I believe, as Qualtrics and others have done for many years, that you cannot focus on CX alone. That's not enough. What we need to understand is the relationship, the harmony between customer experience and employee experience, what I sometimes like to refer to as the human experience. But actually, I am now very much on board with the acronym XM, experience management, for two reasons. Experience management encompasses both the employee and the customer, but I'm also a big advocate of the word management, because the problem with CX is that everyone has one. So just saying it doesn't mean anything. It's our ability to continuously manage experiences so they're ever better able at meeting the needs and expectations of customers, colleagues, and shareholders. That's what makes the difference. So despite the fact that Qualtrics have used that acronym for a number of years now, I believe that in 2026 and beyond, you will see that now start to grow in significance. And I think that's an important evolution. So if I summarize all of that, what have we all done collectively as a profession, if you like? Well, we've achieved a lot in putting the awareness of experiences on the agenda. Okay. And I think that is a good thing. However, and unfortunately, whenever I talk about this subject, there's always a but or a however. Whilst the awareness of experiences is now significantly higher than ever before, what we've got to ask ourselves is the focus on experience management going forwards or going backwards? And it's a very interesting question, because the work I do around the world tells me, unfortunately, that as you transverse across the globe, whilst some are going forwards, some are going backwards. Because I do work on every continent, I can tell you very confidently that in the Middle East, despite all of the challenges that they're having right now, experience management continues to advance. The focus that Saudi, for example, is putting on experience management is quite astonishing. In so-called less developed countries around the world, I do a lot of work in Africa. There is an increasing advance in customer experience and experience management capability, largely because there's a real desire to learn. And so where there are opportunities to develop, those countries tend to seize on that more than others. Because regrettably, in so-called established economies like the US, like the UK, like large parts of the Western world, based on what I'm seeing globally, the focus on experience management in general is not going forwards, it's actually going backwards. And there are a number of reasons for this. One reason is arrogance. It's astonishing to me, and maybe to all of you, how many organizations think that they're doing this already. And we don't need to know anything else. We don't need to learn anything else. We've got an NPS score. We know what we're doing. Okay. The US is really quite extreme. It is the land of extremes. And some of the regression in experience is really quite shocking. There is a huge amount of ignorance when it comes to this subject. I call customer experience a science. What you all do is a science. It's not just an intuitive thing. There is a need for organizations to understand competency and capability, but many don't know what those are, but they don't think they need to know what they are because we're already doing it. Our NPS score is 64. We don't need any help. But we're also in a world of apathy. But like any subject, any innovation, so to speak, you get to a point where everyone thinks, well, what's next? And for many years now, in December, I'm asked by a lot of people around the world, what comes after customer experience? Which I find a fascinating question. So there are a number of issues that we are facing, and we've faced for a while now, actually, but we're continuing to face. And the question is why? Why is this happening? And why is this something that anyone working in this field needs to have a sense of? Well, the first thing I will state is leadership. I would say during the pandemic, I observed a significant shift in leadership and the way those supposedly in leadership positions started to change the way they behave and operate. We are currently, in my opinion, living in the most reactive, short-term thinking world that I can personally remember in my lifetime. And I've seen some astonishingly poor examples of leadership over the last 5 years. And what consistently I'm seeing, and this is a slightly humorous take on what I'm seeing with leadership, is that there are 3 bones missing from most leaders' bodies right now. Okay, whether or not you agree with this with your colleagues in your respective organizations, to me, it's amazing how many leaders have lost their wishbone or just don't have a wishbone. And what I mean by that is the organization, their colleagues, have completely lost sight or have no idea what direction the organization is going in. I ask a question consistently when I'm delivering training in-house to people. Have you seen the business strategy? It is incredible how few people within organizations have ever seen the business strategy. Business strategies have become closely guarded secrets, and people don't know the direction the organization's going in. And if they don't know the direction the organization's going in, how can we expect our people to be motivated to want to follow leadership? We're also in a world where I believe that many leaders have completely lost their backbone. Being or becoming a customer-centric organization sustainably requires courage. As we all know, customer experience and experience management are not short-term reactive strategies. They are long-term strategies. And that focus on experience management in the long term is what drives sustainable growth. That takes courage. And unfortunately, I'm seeing very few leaders who have the courage to sustain the focus on this for long enough. And it's a massive problem. But I also strongly believe that the joy of work has gone. Many leaders have completely lost their funny bone. And, we're in a world now where people are waking up in the morning, just what's the point? What am I going to work for? I've just been given a list of tasks to do. I'm not allowed to think. I'm not being empowered to utilize the capability I've got. It's not fun anymore. And in this changing world that we live in, where the next generation of worker has a completely different perspective on life, they need to see that work is not a tiresome, horrible, terrible thing. Actually, it can be a very enjoyable and fulfilling thing at the same time. But in addition to all of this, if I be slightly more serious now, there is sadly a lack of accountability. During I deliver a lot of customer experience masterclasses around the world. And when I talk about customer experience competency, I will always ask people which competency do they believe is the weakest in their organization. And consistently, the competency that professionals tell me they would score lower than any other is culture and accountability. And the reason for this is a complete lack of accountability for customer experience. And what I mean by lack of accountability is lack of governance. Again, this might resonate with all of you, but far too often, still in 2026, businesses, organizations think that it is you and I who are accountable for customer experience. Which we all know we're not accountable for the experience, the whole organization is. But there is a significant lack of structure, rigor, and accountability. And again, if there is not enough education in knowing what that means, there is a need to fill that knowledge gap. If I take this a step further, I use the term structure and rigor. There are some fundamental principles, fundamental competencies that are just not happening. And again, I'll keep reminding you, if I'm validating that you are doing the right things, that's brilliant. When I talk about structure and rigor, I obsess with informing organizations that to sustain the focus on customer experience, they need to adopt a form of framework that enables them to sustain the focus on customer experience. This is just an example of a very simple framework that I will sometimes use with organizations I work with. When you look at these things, I've got no doubt that all of your organizations are doing all of these things. Most organizations are doing all of these things. However, what many are doing is not systemic. It is ad hoc activity that's not connected together. The competency or the part of this systemic approach that I see least well applied is all around customer journey management. Now, again, I'm preaching to the converted here. All of you know how significant and important customer journey mapping should be. But whilst organizations are mapping customer journeys till they're literally coming out of their ears, very few organizations globally, based on all of the interactions I have, are effectively understanding what they're mapping the journey for. And the concept of customer journey management is, in my opinion, the most important concept of all in the subject that experience management has become. But most are doing this badly. What you see on the left-hand side is what I call the customer journey management cycle. It starts with needing to know who the customer is. What I see consistently is that people think that this is about marketing segmentation, but it isn't. The problem is that too many organizations are mapping journeys by product or by channel. Organizations are failing to understand, which is me stating the blindingly obvious, that a customer journey is a customer journey. It's not a product journey or a channel journey, it's a customer journey. And if we map journeys independently of each other, we'll jump to the wrong conclusion as to how customers are interacting with us. What this transpires into is that many are mapping journeys at too granular a level of detail, very often mapping transactions, not the relational journey that their customers are having with them. Additionally, most organizations, and again, this might resonate with you, are mapping their journeys once and never looking at them ever again. When we've mapped the journey, we should then be measuring it to identify the small number of priorities having the greatest negative impact on customer perception and, as a result, financial performance. And then when we identify those priorities, we need to fix them. The problems that I see is that many organizations have historically and continue to measure the customer experience without knowing what the journey looks like. And as a result, the majority of organizations on earth are measuring something that is not representative of the end-to-end customer journey. And as a result, they're jumping to the wrong conclusion. If I prod and poke companies hard enough, they'll give me a very good idea as to what their priorities are. But they never fix them. They procrastinate. They demand more information. No one wants to take accountability. It's only when we adopt this continuous interconnected cycle of activity that we reach what I call the nirvana state of customer journey management. The fundamental problem here is the following. If you can see me in the image, there is a concept that I encourage practitioners to share with their leadership called the customer experience gap. The difference between the current state journey and the future state journey. The problem that this concept is resulting in is that because organizations are fundamentally not addressing the macro priorities in their current state journey, the current state journey is not fundamentally changing. What a lot of organizations are doing is fixing micro issues, but they're fixing the same issues over and over again. They are not fixing the macro issues and preventing those problems from happening. The reason this is important is because the future state journey represents perfection. If you could deliver the perfect journey, what would perfection look like? The difficulty we face in 2026 with the advancement of digital technology is that future aspirational state is continuing to advance, okay? Which means that the gap between the current and the future state is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The problem I foresee is that by the time many organizations realize that they're not fundamentally changing the current state, the future state will be too far away. The gap will essentially be too big. And as soon as that gap becomes too big, that this is where we run the risk of our organizations ceasing to be relevant. And so when you then think about, okay, so how do we deal with this? How should we be articulating this to leadership teams? What you'll notice is that I describe all of this very simply, which is intentional. I think many have overcomplicated experience management. And I want people to understand that all experiences are delivered through this very simple, conceptual experience management operating model that has 3 layers. The top layer are your customer journeys. I'm pretty sure all of your organizations have known that you have customer journeys for a while. The second layer are your business processes, representing everything that you and your colleagues do every day. Unlike the journey, organizations have been aware of process for decades. The problem is that most organizations created and implemented their processes without actually knowing there was a customer journey. So if you try to underpin the customer journey with everything that people do every day, you will come to the realization that those 2 layers don't align. There'll be people doing things every day that will have no impact on the customer at all. And if that's the case, we've got to ask ourselves, why are they doing it then? There'll be processes crossing over each other. There'll be duplication. There'll be gaps where nothing's happening to the customer. And this has got nothing to do with the capability of people. This is to do with the fact that processes were put in place without knowing there was a journey. What many leadership teams don't realize is that the processes that were put in place when the organization was created are still the same today. The journey is constantly changing. Processes tend to stay static. And as a result, over time, processes and journey become more and more misaligned. And unfortunately, again, as you'll all appreciate, this gets even worse when you get to the third layer, the technology layer. Because like process, most organizations bought, designed, and implemented technology without knowing there was a customer journey. And this is why historically, and still to this day, organizations are buying technology, forcing processes into it, and customers get whatever they get. And this is an increasing danger as technology continues to evolve. This is arguably what's happening with AI right now. We need more and more AI, and we're forcing processes into it. Customers get whatever they get. Fundamentally, we cannot start with the journey, with technology and work upwards. What we have got to enable our businesses to understand is that we need to start with the journey and work downwards. So we can truly understand what technology we need that will better enable our processes to do what our customers need us to do. But in addition to this, there is also a huge issue when it comes to measurement. And again, not just James, but I'm sure this will resonate with James too. We are currently living in a world where, and I make very bold statements around this, that most organizations are jumping to the wrong conclusion when it comes to the way that they are measuring the experience. Robust experience measurement should include 3 voices of measurement. VOC, as we all know, VOE, which is voice of the employee, and VOP, which is voice of the process. Whilst most organizations on earth are measuring VOC, most are measuring it badly, and as a result, jumping to the wrong conclusion. Additionally, most are only measuring VOC. So there is little ability to recognize that what is being measured is not an accurate representation of the truth. Far fewer are measuring VOE. In the context of customer experience, when I talk about VOE, I'm not talking about employee engagement. What I'm talking about is employee perception of your organization's ability to deliver the customer journey. VOE is an important mechanism because if it's done correctly, acts as a check and balance for VOC. The perception of your people should not be wildly different to the perception of your customers. But the third voice, in my opinion, is the most important voice of the 3, and that's voice of the process. Voice of the process represents how capable customer-facing processes are at delivering touch points in your customer journey. As all of you know, customer experience is essentially all about cause and effect, what you do and the way your customers feel about what you do as a result. And if you can understand the measurable relationship between cause and effect, the measurable relationship between the performance of customer-facing processes and how your customers feel about it as a result, you can predict how your customers are going to feel. This is the nirvana of customer experience measurement. Very few organizations are doing that. But there is also, as you can see, a 4th voice, a voice that I call voice of the business. As you all know, all of your businesses will be obsessed with ROI. What is the ROI for customer experience? I like to call this voice of the business. It is our responsibility to demonstrate the relationship between these three customer-led voices and the impact that they have on the business. I prefer not to use the term ROI, actually. What I want practitioners to focus on is impact. If we cannot demonstrate the impact, we are going to find it very difficult to sustain the focus. Just by describing voice of the business as our ability to understand the impact on strategic business metrics, it has quite a good effect on helping leaders to understand how all of this connects together. So, as I come to my conclusion before I stop rambling and see if any of you have any questions you want to throw at me, what needs to happen? So, every year I'm told, is customer experience going to go away? Obviously, no, it isn't. What we need to see more of is more mindset change. I still believe that mindset at a leadership level has not changed enough. This is the greatest summary or the best summary I've seen of the mindset shift that we need. We do need organizations to obsess with purpose. We live in a capitalist driven world, as we know. Unfortunately, it's more about the numbers than ever before. We need our businesses to understand that if they focus and obsess with purpose, the profit will follow. We need there to be greater cross-functional collaboration. Unfortunately, many downsides of the pandemic, we almost are living in a more siloed world than ever before. We need to see a greater focus on cross-functional collaboration. Again, with this sort of degradation of leadership that I've observed, sadly, command and control has sort of slipped back in to the way leaders are directing their people. There still seems to be a reluctance to use the word empowerment, but what I describe is a greater need to encourage our people to think and act in the interests of the customer. This is something that organizations I know, like Nationwide, are very good at doing. But there are many around the world that it's almost like the trust in people has evaporated. Don't think, just deliver the task. That is a huge issue. We also need to encourage experimentation. That this is closely connected to empowerment. We need to encourage people to find different ways of doing things. That don't just stick rigidly to the process, even if you know it's wrong. Try different things. If it doesn't work, that's fine. Learn from it and adapt. And we need greater transparency. I mentioned earlier that it's amazing how many employees have never seen the business strategy. Why? Why is it a secret? We need to be transparent, open, and honest with our people. In addition, education, sadly quoting a former politician, I strongly believe that there is not enough recognition of the need to keep learning. I've shared knowledge with more than 60,000 people in 64 countries around the world. Less than 3% of those have represented the C-suite or equivalent. Many leaders say to me they know all of this already, okay, but they don't. And actually, it's quite unusual for me to have a CEO or a CFO on a training course that I run. But when I do, you notice the difference. In addition to this, change management. I'm an old man now. I'm 53. I was working in the 90s. Change management in the 90s was a discipline that organizations were very good at. In fact, I used to work for GE in the 90s. I was taught this methodology. This is the exact thing I was given in 1997. It was white. It's now gone yellow, called the change acceleration process. I still use it to this day. In most organizations I deal with around the world, there is no approach to change management at all. And this is a massive problem. And so we're throwing solutions at organizations and wondering why they're not working. We need to bring back some of the discipline that is not new. It was there, but we need to bring it back. We also need to give people time to think. I've mentioned this already. We are so task focused as a world today. People are not thinking anymore. That lack of thinking leads to a task focused environment. And as a result, when things go wrong, no one will take accountability of the thing going wrong. Not because they don't want to, but because they haven't got time. And it's remarkable to me how many people on the front line get no thinking time at all. There's no time. Just get on with it. Task, task, task. Hit the numbers, hit the numbers. And so no one's thinking anymore. But in addition to that, we also need to be much better at listening. When I develop customer experience strategy or experience management strategy with organizations, as well as incorporating the needs, wants, and expectations of customers, I now ensure that they also incorporate the needs, wants, and expectations of colleagues. It's remarkable how many organizations say they're listening to their people, but they're not really listening to their people. In addition to that, VOC, it's not just about a number. All of you guys know this, but why are we continuing to persist with pushing surveys to customers, but then we do absolutely nothing with it? We don't tell our customers what we do with it, because unfortunately, most of the time we don't do anything with it. And this is why we're heading into a world where the traditional approach to how we think we listen to customers has to change. Ultimately, all of this needs to be underpinned by empathy. Again, there is so much concern about the impact AI is having on business. Many organizations are reacting. They are eliminating humans right now. We're seeing it out on a daily basis, but they are failing to recognize this importance of human to human interaction. And I strongly believe that some of the actions being taken today through the adoption of digital and AI will have to be undone at some point when organizations realize the damage that has done. Too many decisions are being made without understanding the customer, without understanding the colleague, and without understanding the impact that technology has on the customer journey. As Hannah knows, I could speak for hours and hours about this, but I planned to just ramble for about 40 minutes or so, which is what I've done. I will pause at that point. I hope you found it interesting. If nothing else, it's 45 minutes of just sort of allowing your thoughts to just distill. But you are very, very welcome to grill me, challenge me on anything that I've said, or share your own perspectives, which are just as valid as mine. So I will pause at that point and pass back to all of you to ask away.
Thank you, Ian. That was absolutely awesome as ever. You do make me laugh, really, really laugh. Anyway, can I start with the questions? Does everybody mind? So the link between CX and EX, I think it's well recognised that there is a direct link between both of those. However, the anomaly being, of course, the brand Amazon. And I just wondered what your thoughts were around Amazon, the most customer-centric business in the world, with well publicised.
I have an opinion, as you know. I have an opinion on everything. Some of you might not know. I spent 7 years working in online retail, so I have an insight into the industry. Amazon are not perfect. Of that, there's no doubt. No organization is perfect. I have trained senior leaders from Amazon, actually, and they recognize that they're not perfect. Their challenge is an experience management one. So they know that they can improve the customer experience, but they do recognize that they need to improve the employee experience as well. The caveat to this is that a lot of what is reported in the media about Amazon is hugely exaggerated. And that's largely down to the fact that many traditional retailers blame Amazon for their demise. And rather than blaming Amazon for their demise, what they should be focusing on is how can we learn from what Amazon have done. So there are a lot of exaggerations around some of the perceived issues around the way employees are treated at Amazon. Um, as an example of what I mean by this, Amazon is still the world's only retailer to have a one-click purchase. Any retailer can copy them, right? But no retailer chooses to do so because no retailer is prepared to take the same risk and the same financial hit as Amazon did to do that. So yes, there is a need to improve the employee experience, but it's not as bad as the media make it seem. That is my response to that, Hannah. Unless you know otherwise.
I'm just interested in other people's opinions, really, but conscious that I don't want to make the next 12 minutes all about Amazon. So we'll perhaps pick up on that at a later stage, Ian. But over to the group. Has anybody got anything for Ian? I'd love to see him being grilled. So if anybody's got anything of that particular nature, feel free to step in. Lou?
Yeah, it's Tim here. I wonder whether Amazon really is a service. I fear that we're using the language of experience when we should be using the language of service for most businesses. I'm not convinced that the businesses have really moved on from providing services. Yeah, and effectively, services are really about customizing specific needs and to meet a demand. What for me, when we talk about experiences, it's about creating memories. And it's only when you create memories do you then create that next level of economic value. And that's
Yes.
really what we started to try and do at Nationwide many years ago. But many people use the word experience, but they don't actually deliver an experience. They deliver a service that doesn't really create a memory. And then they
So
wonder why they're not
it's a
creating any
very
economic value.
It's a really good point. Whenever I talk about experiences, I talk about the three elements of an experience being the functional, the accessible, and the emotional. What Amazon have nailed is obviously the accessible. That they made it so easy that is how they have created an experience that it means that you and I say you and I, but the consumer, if they want something, the likelihood is they'll go to Amazon first to see if they've got it, but because they can rely on that accessibility. But what Amazon have mastered is that they sell the same stuff as everyone else. It's not the products and services that differentiate them, it's how easy they make it to get to those products and services. But arguably, what Amazon have achieved is almost an experience that makes it so easy to shop with them that there's like almost an emotional impact of being able to go online and buy something and get it later on that day that that does leave an emotional connect. Seeing the Amazon parcel on your doorstep, that there some would argue there is an emotional connection. But I agree with you. It's more about the accessibility of the experience. Whether we see that as service or experience, I think it is up for debate. I'm not too purist in a way. It doesn't really matter to me so much what we call that. But I think the point is that Amazon's differentiation is down to how easy they make it. It's not down to, you're going to feel wow about that someone was so nice to me. It's not about that. It's about the accessibility. That's what they remember. Louise, I think you're next.
Yeah, sorry, just have a random question. Lovely to see you again, Ian, by the way.
Lovely to see you too.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, I was in a debate the other day, watching a forum going through, and they were talking about empathy in the workplace and empathy relative to the customer experience. And you mentioned it a second ago, actually, which was triggered my mind. And empathy generally to how we need to train the next generation of people. Right now, one could argue, we think, oh yeah, that's right. But the debate in the room was, is empathy still what we should be focusing on, or is it actually a respect for the customer and a respect for what they want, which in
Ah,
turn is also a respect for the employee. And I just wondered what you thought about that,
it,
Ian, because it did generate lots of noise in the
yeah,
room, I have to say. And I
it
thought ever since then, they've
really
been bugging
interesting
me. Right.
question. This is not all my own thought actually, because I do shamelessly steal others' thoughts as well. But I read an article in Harvard Business Review 2, 3 years ago about the need to move beyond empathy. Because when you think about it, on the face of it, empathy is someone expressing their understanding of how this makes you feel. All right, but great. So what? And the point being is that actually, if you move beyond empathy, you go to compassion, because what compassion does is then you act on it, because you can empathize and not do anything, which I think is an issue. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. I'd hate it if that happened to me. Right. What else? What have you got? Another question? I think when it comes to this point of respect, respect is empathizing. But then if you truly do have respect for what someone's saying, you'll then try to actually act on what you're hearing. And I think in a way, you could argue that so many applications of VOC, that there is sort of an intent to empathize with the customer. But unless you act on it, it doesn't mean anything. So I think actually we need to be talking more about compassion. But because you think about global conflict at the moment, we can all empathize with what people are going through in Dubai. Although someone said to me the other day that a friend of theirs is stuck in the Maldives. I thought, well, that's a terrible shame. But we can empathize with them, but actually it's our ability to act on that and do something to help them that I think demonstrates that we truly respect what we're hearing. That's my view.
Thank you, Ian. Good to see.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
Pleasure. Louisa. Oh, you're on mute.
Eventually I'll get the hang of this mute button. Yeah, just in terms of practically measuring the customer journey, because it's something that and we have a plan to improve our digital journey to help gather
Yes.
it. But at the moment, and I just as a reminder, I work for P&O Ferries.
Yes.
Customers book with us in a certain way.
Yeah.
By the time they arrive on the ship, they're a whole new person to us, and we're struggling to join that piece up. We're looking at a digital journey, which I think will help a lot if we can track customers all the way through. Do you have examples of companies that have done this really well, and is there a way of doing it ahead of getting that digital journey?
So my answer is yes. The just based on what you're saying to me, it is possible that you're overthinking and overcomplicating it. Okay, because many are. I think what many need to do is to get out of the detail and think about the journey at a much higher level. And before you start measuring, you need to know what does it look like. The challenge for you, Louisa, is that, and this is where this digital thing comes in, the likelihood is that there are customer facing processes that you are not currently measuring. Okay, because businesses tend to measure, as you know, what's important to them, not what's important to the customer. In addition, there is a possibility that your VOC mechanism also won't necessarily be representative of the end-to-end journey. Okay, the biggest mistake organizations are making, in my opinion, from a VOC perspective, is that what they're measuring is not representative of the end-to-end journey, but it's also not representative of all customers who go through that journey. All right.
Yeah, so it always worries me that you've already filtered for people that it's been good enough for, that they've made a booking.
What you've got to remember is that there will be a huge volume of people that will come onto your website that won't buy. All right. And many organizations think that they don't measure that. They don't capture feedback from those customers, you know. So when you think about it, largely we're only capturing feedback from happy customers or customers who completed the transaction, right? But that's what I call the insignificant minority, all right? Because the majority started and didn't continue. But why? You know, so I think this is not a direct answer, but reach out to me, Louisa, because I think what you might want to just have a think about is the methodology for mapping the journey, and just to make sure you're not overcomplicating it. Because that will then help you to determine what the measurement system should look like underneath. So just reach out to me and we can have more of a chat.
Great. Thank you.
Very interesting. Does anybody else have anything to say or question or anything?
Just one quick one from me, if you don't mind. Going right back to the start of your introduction, Ian, which was really, really good and insightful. In terms of accountability, you talked about that being a clear competency that was lacking.
Yeah.
If that is the consistent gap, what would you say the structural mechanisms are required to ensure that customer outcomes carry equal weight in decision making over financial outcomes?
I cannot overstress the importance of a framework, but a framework where there is a clear understanding of who is accountable for what in it.
Yeah.
You know, that I say the collective we're not responsible for customer experience. We are responsible for methodology. We're responsible for the approach, blah, blah, blah. And so then we basically need to hold people's asses to the fire. And right now they're not. Just to give you an indication, I'm not a salesperson because this is not mine. If you want the best example of what I'm talking about, this book, which you can buy on Amazon, written by Diane Majors and Michael Hinshaw. The reason I am suggesting it to you is that their framework is called the Experience Operating System. It is as simple as anything else you will find out there. That kind of framework is exactly what organizations need to adapt. They don't have to adopt exactly the same thing, but if you look at that, do we have that in place? Can we measure something like that? Who is accountable for each part of it? All of that is just missing, you know. And have a look at that, Leslie Ann, because I think you'll find that really insightful. As I say, that there's no one way. There's no one framework that exists, but the Experience Operating System, as I say, is I think as simple as anything out there. At the center of it is the human, so it is as much about the employee as the customer. But what I like about it is that it also focuses on technology and process, not just the journey. So really worth having a look at.
Thank you.
Fab. Anita, did you have something that you wanted to say?
I just wanted really I guess just to get some insight. So, you know, I believe, you know, that we are doing a lot of the really great stuff, very systems thinking, building stuff, getting customer feedback, designing that, involving our employees. However, despite doing all of that really good stuff and customers being very happy, I have a founder that believes that AI is the way to go, right? Even though we've got no transactional contact coming in, it is very complicated and very difficult. And just, I'm wondering how the industry is going to keep challenges when you've got such big companies out there pushing AI to replace people. And almost for me, AI is designed for broken processes. Right? It's not designed for doing the right thing. It's designed to plug a gap.
I completely agree with you, Anita. It's one of the reasons why for years I've described customer experience, let alone experience management, as a fact-based methodology. The problem is that we often do not have enough possession of accurate facts to argue against it. So, for years, when I was at my retailer, our primary measure was customer satisfaction. And every time a new leader came in, so this is a long time ago now, a new leader would come in and say, why aren't you measuring NPS? Right. And we did measure NPS, but there was a reason why we led with customer satisfaction and not NPS. And the problem is that if I didn't have good possession of the facts, every time a new leader came in, it would have just changed without me having any impact on it. But because I had possession of the facts, I was able to wheel out the same presentation every time to articulate why we did it this way. So I think that what we need to be thinking about, if we're not already, is what are the facts that we need to put in front of people like that to help them understand that, yes, we know AI is significant. Okay, but we need to adopt it in alignment with the customer journey. It's not the answer to everything. And one of the things I constantly try and explain to people is, where does the financial impact come from improving the customer experience? And it comes in two broad categories, one being revenue generation, the other being cost reduction and cost avoidance. Okay, not cost cutting. Okay, you see what these guys are thinking is this is going to save us loads of money because we can strip out cost. But that if you want to strip out cost, literally fire everyone and replace it with AI. But what we know is it's going to make the experience worse. What we need to be able to do is to explain to people like this that, if you look at our current state customer journey and you look at the pain points in that journey, many of those pain points are costing us a fortune. And it's not because of our people, it's because of broken process. So if we can actually determine how can AI eliminate those pain points, that's where we will start to avoid unnecessary cost. Do you see what I mean? It's like that
And I think I do that, and where it goes away for several months, and then they go and hear something else and keep coming back. So I do keep dusting things off, demonstrating all of the good things. But I think what I want is I need industry to start speaking out more. But I mean, and for me, it feels like the biggest voice in the room is the developers of AI, not the industry leaders being able to help educate people.
I've said for years, we're not magicians, so there's only so much we can do. I talk a lot about borrowing authority, Anita. If you want to borrow someone like me to talk to people like that, you're very welcome to, because I won't charge anything to do that. But I think that's potentially what needs to happen more. Additionally, we had someone with nationwide experience in here. Nationwide won't be doing that. So, but I think very often what I've done as a practitioner, so when I was sitting in your seat, rather than asking another CX professional, I would find another CEO or another COO to go and talk to someone like that. This is one of the benefits of being involved in the awards, because if you look at someone like Octopus Energy, and how are Octopus Energy winning all of these awards? If you can create a relationship or connect with other organizations that are more mature, but get their leadership to talk to investors and other people, they're more likely to listen to them than they are to even people like me. You're right, they're going to be easily influenced by both the media and big tech. But actually, if they listen to other business leaders and what they've done and why it made a difference, that might be an angle to explore.
Thank you.
Pleasure.